Hey everybody, happy Sunday night. Today is June 16th, 2024. We are across the pitch. Dave, I know you're not a dad yet, but it's happy Father's Day to all the union dads out there in Philly and across the seas, wherever you are. Hopefully you're all enjoying your happy Father's Day. Uh, it's not a very celebratory episode though tonight.
No.
It's gonna be a bit heated. There might be some ranting from Dave and I, but either way, Dave, it's always good to see you and be talking to you, buddy. How you doing tonight?
Yeah, I mean, obviously England kicks off their Euros campaign with the win, so that's obviously great. You know, but not a good weekend for Philly sports. I mean, the Phillies, come off the back of two defeats to the Orioles, and then
Yeah.
they're compounded with, quite frankly, an embarrassing defeat last night for the Union, considering the circumstances.
So somebody, I think it was Kevin Kincaid or somebody, a few people on Twitter said that was the most embarrassing Union home loss that they can remember in recent history. And I'd have to agree with him. I mean, you can argue that the Miami Leagues Cup one was embarrassing just because the team didn't show up. You can probably think of another 4 or 5 games off the top of your head that really are mind numbing to think about. But last night was just a whole different kind of something else. Now, for those of you who don't talk to Dave and I regularly, whatever, I've been insanely busy. I haven't watched a game since before the New England match because I've had concerts, baby showers rather, 50th anniversary parties. I've had everything under the sun. I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch a Union game in quite some time live, right? Live.
Yeah.
So last night I get done this party. I'm rushing home. I get back home with the final 30 minutes to play. And I'm like, okay, it's 1-1, but at least I'm here now. I can watch it. So you watched the first half. You were fully into that first half along with Jose. Walk me through that because because apparently it was a good first half, but I just don't believe it at this point.
But I mean, the first half of the Union came out again, scored after 3 minutes, started hot. Glasnow's with a nice defence, splitting past Luo, who made a great run and timed it perfectly to get in between the two centre halves, just to run goal and scores. And again, Union had multiple chances in that first half to add to that lead. I mean, Quinn Sullivan had another similar chance where he was played through on goal 1-1, and a Miami defender sort of just got there in time to sort of throw him off balance to, as Quinn was shooting. So again, Quinn's dragged the shot a couple of yards wide when perhaps he could have done better. And again, there was another big chance of Quinn during the first half as well, and the ball sort of dropped him inside the box. And I'm not entirely sure if it was. I think it was very well blocked from inside the box when you're hoping that Quinn sort of starts that into the back of the net. So I mean, the Union had 2, 3, 4 really big chances after the first goal and didn't take any of them and were subsequently punished, and I'm sure you saw coming into the start of the second half.
So how many times have we seen that now? Where you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the Cincinnati match last year when you're walking into the locker room. And please correct me if I'm wrong. They had a 2-0 lead at home against Cincinnati, and you think, oh, we got this in the bag. It's one of the best teams in the conference, and then they end up drawing that match. And if I remember correctly, they scored almost right away. No, against Cincinnati.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was the game. I'm trying to remember the game. Was that the game where Elliott got sent off right at the end after Cincinnati were down to 10 men themselves?
It might have been. At this point, everything from that season is a blur. This season is becoming a blur as well. But there's our third mate, Jose Nunez, could not join us tonight. Jose, hopefully you're having a great Father's Day as well out there with your two boys. I mean, the point being, though, is if it feels like they are conceding quickly, whether it be the first half, second half, and it seems like they take the foot off the gas way too often. And then Jose actually says, you are correct. That's when on an $8 million did $8 million things, curtain on Bupenza. That's true. So I think I wasn't surprised when I turned the game back on. It was 1-1 because okay, what happened? They gave up a goal in the first 5 minutes. Yep, sure enough, it was some crappy goal that they allowed for Miami. But then you go up a man and you feel a little bit better, and then you go up 2 men and you feel a little bit better, and you think there's no way in hell they could possibly lose this match. A draw, if you don't win, so be it, whatever. But the fact that they gave up that goal, and in our Twitter chat last night, Dave, you mentioned the defensive shape not existing. Can you go on about that more in detail for the people listening here?
again, there were signs like even after the goal in that second half, where just you knew the Union were in trouble. Like it was just so many occasions where Miami were going forward, even with 10 men, it was like 3-on-4, 3-on-2, 4-on-2. Nothing.
Mhm.
What the hell is going on? There was one instance where I think it was like 3-on-1 and Glazers was on his own. Harriel was nowhere to be seen, nor was Guy Wagner, nor was Olivier and Bijo. You're thinking, what the hell is this defensive shape? And who was coaching the defensive shape in the station? It's not like this is just a one off occurrence. Like,
Right.
they're playing 10 men, they're 9 men, they can overcommit because I think they can. It's just almost a weekly occurrence where the Union, like, you know, there was no one playing in defence or there's no actual shape in that team. And you're just thinking, what the hell's going on? And yes, we can all talk about how great Kai Wagner is as a defender because he is when he's in position. But again, if one fullback's going to bomb on and overcommit, you tell your other centre back, you tell your other fullback to be cautious, hold off, be in position ready to defend, to slot in as like a third centre back, or just to have a bit of shape there. And again, Olivier's then bombing on as well. It's not then as if Leon Flaxman sitting in deep to slot in as well. He's then also committing forward, and there's no shape to the defense. It's a weekly occurrence. Even when Jose Martinez is playing,
Yep.
it's not like he then sits in just in case the ball they do lose the ball, he can then drop in like. And at times last night, Harriel was nowhere to be seen as well. There's so many occasions like Lesnar was on his own in certain defensive situations, or Bizer was there. Like again, defensively, this team just this warning signs have been there all season, and again, last night was just another, uh, just another highlight for the compilation, which I'm sure
Yep.
we'll put together. Todd also will put together at the end of the season, when we're doing the end of season review, and again, Todd does great analysis of not just Union games, but Union goals or goals in Union games, but just overall patterns of play. I'm sure someone.
Abs-
I'm sure Todd
Yeah.
will do something like that, something great at the end of the season. But again, just defensively, the team just doesn't. The solidity, the structure just isn't there this year. And I don't know whether that's a matter of the team's been found out and teams are easily picking them apart, or something's going on behind the scenes and just things aren't right behind the scenes. People aren't actually committing to their roles or like whatever. But something is not right in this team, and we'll get deeper into it in the show. But yeah, that just shows the dysfunction of what is going on right now in this team, where you can't score enough. You can't score consistently. Well, you're not scoring enough goals up the other end of the pitch to make up for the frailties and the frailties at the defensive end.
Well, that's the thing. And Val joins us. Says I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about either, Val, but we have to at this point because I think earlier in the season you had you could rely on the offense as the season went on. Probably over the not this past couple of weeks, but before that, you say even if they give up 2 goals or an early goal, they're going to come back into this game and score at least 2 or 3 more goals, right? That's how they have been consistently. And then you get it was after the New England match, right? You win 3-0, whatever up there, and then you have these shutouts. You go to Charlotte, you can't score. You go into these offensive lulls now, where at first you were just like getting shredded apart on defense, and now it was a complete opposite. Now you can't score, but you're pitching shutouts three matches in a row. And it's like if you can't rely on the offense anymore to bail you out of these situations, and you can't rely on the defense to play consistently enough, what can you rely on this team at this point? Because at this point, I can't think of anything. And on top of that, to make matters worse, you sell your best striker. Well, unofficially, sell your best striker, Julian Carranza. And to Jose's credit, and Jose mentions here, last one before I go ghost mode, how bad is Oluwafu if he can't make it over Harriel as a CB, a failed U22 attempt, making 260K in MLS Next Pro is criminal.
I will get on to the failures of
we'll get on to that in a second
because I think there's one person that is escaping a lot of the criticism right now.
Yes, we'll talk about that in a second. I do want to give Jose some credit. I know he's not joining us tonight, but I want to give him some credit because last night he asked Kai Wagner straight up about the situation going on. Kai was very vocal. And if you guys don't follow him on Twitter, I'm sure he posts on Facebook or Substack. Kai goes on to say basically that the ownership and the team need to invest in these players. They can't rely on the youth. They can't rely on getting rid of Julian Carranza and then just having these young guys come in and fill the void. And I'm paraphrasing here. This isn't verbatim. I'm just paraphrasing. Kai's openly calling out the ownership to get things done. I believe it was Jonathan Tannewell also mentioned that some of the players had highlighted there's no rift between Curtin and the players. It's clearly ownership in the front office that is causing these problems. And I think, honestly, that's what makes it worse. We've seen, like, Dave, I don't know how long you've been a Sixers fan, but I've been a Sixers fan through the process. I went through the process. I watched those games. And there was that expectation of losing that was just always going to be there. And I didn't mind that they lost so much because you didn't expect them to win.
You could also see the clear plan of what they were trying to do.
Exactly. You see the resolution here. We all know the Union can win and do better if they spend money. And it's so obvious what the solution is, and they just don't want to do it. And that's what I think bothers me the most. That's probably what bothers the players the most, because unlike the players, you and I will be watching the Union for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. These players have windows that they're going to play for this club, and then they're done forever. And they are fans just like the rest of us. So I don't blame them for being upset, because it's not like it's just they're on a bad team. They're on a good team that can be better if ownership just gave a shit. I know you have some thoughts, though, with the club. So I want to shoot back to you to what you're maybe referring to a few seconds ago.
I was going to say, quickly before we do move on to that, quickly go over the final goal as well last night. And, I think you called it the final goal. Again, the final goal last night, the Union give the ball away, probably a third of the way through inside Miami's half. And you're thinking, okay, they've given the ball away. Someone's pressurizing the guy. You at least... I'm not entirely sure who was... I'd have to rewatch the goal. I think it might be Nate Harrell who was putting pressure on the guy with the ball. And you'd expect 2 or 3 players to think, oh shit, we are in trouble there. We'll drop off a bit, or at least, we'll at least push off a bit, just in case, so we got players back. That's not what happened. I don't know if you saw it. The Miami guy had the ball, and there were 4 Inter Miami players who were literally just all in a straight line with no one around them, who were all starting to make runs forward as the Union just sort of stood there and watched them. And Glesnes was the only guy back, and it was essentially, in the end, it was a 2-1. But again, the fact that there was a bank of 4 with no one around them, with Miami on the ball, and a straight line of just 4 Miami players waiting to pounce if the ball was to come to them, and there was not a Union player in sight. Just think, where is the determination to get back and try and get that ball back? It was essentially just, again, it was a sickening goal to concede. In the fact that there was just no. Again, you were busting the gut. You're drawing 1-0 at home against 9 men. You're thinking there's still a couple of minutes left. We can try and win this. You would be busting the gut to try and get back and at least try and stop this counter attack. But instead, Miami, the ones even with 9 men on the road, you're thinking a point. We're top of the Eastern Conference. A point without Messi, without Suarez. Miami are probably thinking themselves, just a good point, and we'll take that. We'll treat it as a win. No, but then the team that only one that can more likely to win. They were the team that wanted to win. Again, there was nothing in the pattern of play from the Union during that second half, especially against 10 and 9 men, that made me think, yeah, this team looks like they want to win this game. They just didn't. There was no urgency to the forward play. There was no. Do you know what I mean? There was nothing to the play, and then you just. Again, and just the final minute with the goal scored, just encapsulated the 4. Miami get the ball, and instantly the first thing they do, they have a bank of 4 players ready, all to commit to the attack. Whilst the Union all stood there looking at them, going, "Oh, they won't." It was almost as if the Union thought, "Oh, they're not going to complete this pass. The guy's just going to clear. It'll come out of play. We're going to carry on." No one anticipated the worst case scenario, and what happened was the worst case scenario.
I pulled it up. I had to watch it real quick to refresh my memory. So even if in those final 15 minutes, I felt like they just couldn't get a shot off at net. Didn't you feel that way? Like they couldn't get a shot off, and they couldn't get a clearance or a cross into the box dangerous enough to test the keeper or any sort of shot on net. So I'm looking at the final few seconds, like you mentioned. So McGlynn has the ball probably about 10 yards away from the top of the 18, and he kicks it right into a Miami player. I mean, it's not even – I don't know where he was going with that. And then as soon as he does that, the Miami player takes it towards the sideline. At this point, McGlynn is trying to fix a mistake. I believe that's Quinn is trying to fix a mistake. Harriel's in front of him. But you have Flock, you have Danny, you have Kai, you have all three of those players. I'm trying to look closely up here real quick as well. It looks like Baribo, four players that in my screen at the top where they put the score just tucked in the corner. At this point, you have 1, 2, 3 Miami players already running. And then by the time the goal goes into the net, only Flock is in view. I don't even know who else was running at this point. So I'm looking as the play continues. Yeah, Flock is desperately trying to get back. Harriel's trying to get back. It was just – I saw somebody online post as well. When they put Baribo in and took Olivier out, it essentially allowed that – it gave the window for Miami to do that.
Yeah.
Because then they were too far open in the back line. I don't know what it is, Dave. I don't understand it. I'm not a soccer tactician like you and Jose are, where I can map it out for you either. But it's just mind numbing to watch. That's the thing. Go ahead.
Something's not right, and I know that everyone can say, "Oh, everything's on board behind the scenes, playing wise," but something's not right. And it hasn't been right for a while. I think I said before the Pachuca Road game in the CONCACAF Champions League, I said this will be the game that speaks volumes about where the Union will be this season, because they're going into a raucous, a high tempo atmosphere. You know, it's going to be raucous, it's going to be rocking, and again, I think Pachuca went on to win the Champions League, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Which people may say it softens the blow, but I said that game will show a lot about what we think of this team, because if they go a goal down early, we'll see how they react, or if they go 2 goals down, we'll see how they react. And they ended up losing 6-0, and they just completely crumbled. Again, but then Union ended up following up with like 4 or 5 wins on the bounce, and I thought, okay, maybe this team has got it about them to be able to bounce back. But unfortunately, I think we're now starting to see that 6-0 game probably tells us more, was probably a barometer of where this team is. Like, it's not. This team perhaps is mentally weak. It's not as strong as we thought it was. There isn't, as many leaders in there as we thought there were. Like, and again, this isn't on Jim. I know, perhaps Jim Curtin's tactics are stale, but again, you can only do so much when you've had the same team for 3.5, 4 years. Like,
and that's a thing. And even Dave, I'm sorry to cut you off, but even let's look at this. Something that Jim said on the press conference yesterday kind of bothered me. This kind of goes to your point, okay? So he mentions that Alejandro Bedoya left the match yesterday with a quad issue. He had a knock during training on his quad. Thought he was fine for the game. He re-aggravates it in the game. He's out. I believe Bueno comes in at that point, right?
Yeah.
To your point, you're saying the depth of the team, the quality team. If you know Bedoya is not 100%, and you're about to you're entering this international break, you have very, very limited players. Why not just start Bueno in Bedoya's spot? I understand that he's the captain. I understand that he's there to be a leader. But are you that unable to use Bueno in a situation like that when it's clear your captain's not 100%? Has Bueno fallen that far off since last year that he can't even start one match against a Miami team that's missing Messi? But again, to your point, if the roster was better, you could sit Ali and not have to worry about it, and not have to take a chance on Jesus Bueno being the 2023 version of himself.
Yeah, I think it just shows the lack of, what's the word? I mean, just the lack of trust in the players that Jim. Blackfoot, but the players that Jim brings in. I mean,
sure,
the Union are bringing in players. Maybe apart from Damian Lowe from last year, the only 2 real signings the Union have actually made since the 2020 season was Mikelua coming in January, in January 2022, and Julia Carranza. They're the only 2 players that have actually, been made a major impact on this team in 3 seasons. 3 seasons. So the last 3 seasons, the Union have signed 2 players, and I'd like to believe. And I'm going to ask a question right now. Scouting wise, the Union every single year up until that point, I'd even argue, had done quite well at managing to constantly keep the roster fresh, and when players left, they managed to find good players to bring in. And I feel like the scouting for Mikelua would have probably, looking into signing Uwa would have probably started long before January 2022. Coincides when Chris Albright left the team to FC Cincinnati. who, since he's come in, have become one of the best rosters, best teams, and have consistently had one of the best rosters in the MLS, whilst having a reduced budget and having one of the
Yeah.
smaller budgets in the league. So I'm going to ask the question: was the reason why this team was so successful in terms of getting in quality players for small, with a small budget and that's one of the smaller budgets because because of the scouting of Chris Albright. Because I know he brought a couple of the behind the scenes staff with him to Cincinnati as well. You look at the money Cincinnati is spending every year, and look at the rise they've had since he's come in. Like, they've been competing since he's come in. He's completely, overhauled their roster. And he's completely turned them into a competitive team. And in every single year since he's gone there, he's made multiple players who've come in and made an impact. On small deals, like again, you look at and then to me, it's just baffling to me. And they're a team that have lost some of their best players as well, and they're a team that haven't exactly reinvested the money either. I mean, they lost Brenner, I believe it was last year they lost Brenner, wasn't it? And Brenner, didn't exactly replace Brenner, but again, they stayed competitive because
he's hard. He's a hard player to replace. To his credit,
sure. And they kept things. They kept things fresh. I mean, look at the players they brought on this year, and they're probably the best team in the MLS of going off the amount of games they've played and everything. Again, they've not exactly spent big this year either. They've spent free transfers and signed DeAndre Edlin and signed Bucha from Victoria Pilsen. That's literally it.
Yeah.
They've not thrown money at everything. I mean, they've not signed Baribo for $1 million. Do you know what I mean? Like, is the scouting in this team behind the scenes, or are the decision makers on who is actually coming into this team? Were the guys that were able to find the gems, that were able to make impacts in the team? Did they go to Cincinnati with Chris Albright, or has Ernst Tanner, now Albright's gone, perhaps have more of a say of who he actually wants? Because we haven't actually seen any good, apart from Carranza, we haven't seen any great players that have come in. And again, if Jim's not got a say over who comes into this team, you can't then expect him to use players that he's not a fan of, or he doesn't like, or he believes doesn't fit his system when they do come in. I mean,
and that's the thing. That's the thing. People are calling for Curtin's head a lot right now, and I don't blame them. But to your point, it's hard to do what Curtin is doing with the players he has on his roster.
Yeah.
But to Jose's point, Jose corrected me a bit, so thank you, Jose, for joining. Again, I've been very busy. I appreciate Jose taking the lead here. He says Jose suffered Bedoya suffered an injury in the first, then at the half, and Jim decided to trot him out anyways. So now Bedoya is out for at least Cincinnati, if not longer. And that is ultimately a Curtin decision, if he's going to allow Bedoya to play, knowing there's some sort of issue. And Steve Fuentes says, what's going on, fellas? I'm going to wait for this to load. Question, worst loss this season? Pachuca lost 6-0 or last night's loss? I'd say last night's loss.
Yeah.
100% last night's loss.
I mean,
because for a 6-0 beat it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you said, luckily for me, I remember I was at work, so I left the game and I thought I'll watch the first half, watch the second half. I watched the first half. It was 2-0, and I thought, if they get an early goal, they could never know. But then Jose, thank God, the message was like, yeah, if I was you, I wouldn't watch it. It ended 6-0. Jose sort of put me out of my misery. But again, as you sort of said, I think it's all circumstantial as well, isn't it? You can, if you look at the two losses side to side, like the Pachuca game, they end up winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and they've gone to Mexico. They've played one of the best teams in Mexico, as opposed to last night where they're at home. Okay, yes, players on international duty, but you look at that Miami team without, again, they had Alba and Busquets, but you look at the Inter Miami team without Suarez and Messi. And again, there's all this. You're playing 9 men. You're in the lead. You dominate the first half for so long. But I think Tanner's more to blame than Jim for this situation, because again, if you're having to use the same players, the same team, and you're then having to rely on academy players that aren't ready or aren't good enough to make up the gaps, because you don't believe, because one, you haven't
Raffanello.
Raffanello, no disrespect to Jeremy Raffanello. But you know what I mean? You're having to put these players, having to fill gaps with players that aren't exactly ready, because the players that have been brought in for you, one, you don't fit the way that you want to play. Two, clearly aren't good enough if they can't get the team. Paribo, Pereira, Torres. Um, it's a constant occurrence. You look at all the other players that we brought in the last couple of years as well. Like, where's the bet? Like, they spent like $260,000 on a Barca. $220,000 on the Barca Arameo. Adada was meant to be an exciting prospect. Has come nowhere near getting close to the team. Look at last year.
No.
Again, I mentioned Pereira, Torres, Damian Lowe ended up coming good, but like again, this season's about the two major signings this season were players that were here last season.
And also, it feels like the Union have invested more in their second team than it has been the first team. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you, because the second team is doing phenomenal. I mean, they're soaring right now in MLS Next Pro, while the first team is struggling. And you know what, Dave? I kind of want to call the Union out on to be, I guess, hypocritical on the Union. The Union preach youth development, right? I mean, that is their bread and butter. We're gonna pull them out when they're young little kids, and we're gonna develop them, and they're gonna be sold overseas, a la Mark McKenzie and Brendan Aronson and Paxton Aronson, and even people like Fontana, whoever else, they get sent overseas and they get do their own thing, whatever. I find it hypocritical, though, that they have allowed players like McGlynn, Sullivan, I'd say Harriel, Donovan for sure, to be thrusted in positions that they're not yet ready for, because that is part of youth development. These kids like McGlynn, Harriel, Sullivan, they're all still under 22. I mean, I don't know if Harriel might be a little bit older, but they're all still, I mean, fairly young kids, and especially from an athlete standpoint. I mean, these are still kids playing against grown men in these leagues. And yes, is McGlynn awesome? Sure. Does Sullivan have these moments of amazing ability? Absolutely. But he's still a growing, developing player. So I find it funny how they push and emphasize so much development, and that is their core, to make these players as good as possible. But then they're put into these situations like you see last night, where they're asked to come and win them a game, or Donovan is brought into the MLS Cup final to win them a game when he's not ready to be there. So yes, you want to be a team that does Moneyball, and you develop youth and you play your academy and you play these kids. That's great, but you're hurting these players too by not bringing in these veterans like Joaquin Torres or Andres Pereira, who have MLS experience, who have veteran experience, to be that stopgap as they become 23, 24, 25-year-old players. That's the thing. Yeah. That's part of development too, which the Union seem to have forgotten about with their first team.
Oh, yeah. I think also, like, as you sort of mentioned, like bringing in youth team players, younger players as well. Like, son, even like you look at the players this year. I mean, again, it just doesn't make for great reading. I mean, the only sort of players that needed to bring in was like Sanders and Garbo, who's playing for the U2. Just looking through the players they brought in. I mean, again, like on the way through Macania, they spent called to transfer market. They spent the website. They spent €445,000 on him. Again, the players they brought in this year, like they'd expect Marcus Anderson, a 20-year-old, unfortunately suffered from injury. But again, a player you brought in from the third, fourth division of Spain, like Sanders and Garbo. Again, a young kid who's clean already. David Vasquez, an 18-year-old. Do you know what I mean? Oliver Semler from Louisville. Like, again, to be fair to Semler, he's had a strong year, but it's like, again, it's not actually making any improvements to your starting 11. It's the same starting 11 week in and week out. And the only reason that Semler's playing is because of Andre Blake having injury issues. So again, like this has been the same lineup from 2022 to this year. So nothing has changed. But nothing has changed about this team in 3 seasons now, and it's not going to change. It's going to be a forced change now because Julia Carranza's gone, but they're not going to replace Carranza. Oh, again, quickly just to point to Steve's comment as well. Like, what other coaches in sports can have 2 losses like that within months of each other and keeping their job? I don't know if you saw that comment, Mike. I'm going to pull up
I see.
Again, you could. I mean, I do agree the 2 losses aren't great, but I guess the only argument you can make for football is the fact that because there's so many more games played, it's sort of you can't really take certain results in isolation. But again, on the flip side, you could argue how many general managers or how many head head footballs or head of scouting departments managed to keep their jobs with the with the right record the union have with their signings over the last 3 seasons. Two or three hits over like 20, 30 signings. In the NFL, that gets a general manager fired. In the NBA,
Yeah.
that gets a GM fired. But do you know what I mean? Like again, like you can't. You need to have more. You need to be able to reload the team and to be able to change. To be able to not only just keeping things fresh, but being able to bring in newer players. Because again, when you do bring in players that do not only one fit your system, or at least two, are players that the manager rates. Because I mean, again, clearly that there are players that have come into the union which Jim Curtin just simply didn't rate and didn't fit his system.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, that's the maybe
like,
this and maybe the system needs to be changed entirely.
but again, the question. But then there's only one way you can go with this team because there's no wingers, there's no pace in this team, there are no players that can create width on this team. So again, if you're
Mhm.
building, if head of football or whatever Stan's role is, if your whole if your whole philosophy is the diamond or we want to play narrow football, no wingers and stuff like that, like then do you know what I mean? Like, clearly something isn't right there. And again, like you've
Yeah.
spent all that money on Baribo, who is nowhere near the team. I mean, what he's played about 25, 30 minutes this
Well,
year.
and that goes back to again the not it goes back to ownership. It does, and scouting, like you said. Why aren't these players seeing that? And communication between the front office and the head coach, and allowing Jim to pick players himself. All that's tied together. And Valerie's comment mentions, on my way out last night, I passed Andre and Julian coming down the stairs, all smiles and laughing. I was not smiling and laughing. And Valerie, that brings me to a point where the fans are just fed up. People are questioning whether they want to re up their season tickets, especially because it's more expensive now than it was last year. If I'm a Union fan who has been around for a while and I have season tickets, I'm questioning why I want to redo them because it's clear that the team does not want to invest in them. So why should I invest in the team myself? At the same time, I'm kind of calling out the fans too, and the Sons of Ben and all these organizations and the fans. It's time to do something and make some sort of gesture towards ownership to show that it's just not good enough. Because the problem is, if we're buying all their kits and every single month they have military appreciation kit and a pride kit and this kit and the Hispanic kit, and they're having the LBF there's so much gear and apparel now and stuff that you're just buying and endlessly doing. You're still supporting them until all that stops, until all the jersey sales stops, until the seats are basically empty. There's no reason for the union to stop what they're doing because every single week they're getting a sellout. They're still selling merch. They're still, making money off the union yards, which is clearly cursed the entire franchise forever. So there has to be something done from the fans, which doesn't feel like it's happening anytime soon. That's a problem.
Again, I think it's just all said like there was so many issues wrong with the club, and again, I mean, it's probably a credit to Jim because again, like, um, quick again,
Yeah.
just reload Steve's comment. It's a great point. Again, it's 2 years since the final, but is that not then a credit to what Jim's done? What Jim has done, especially last year, the fact that he had the exact same squad last season, and we were talking about again. To be fair, we are one of the people who said this is great for the team, but again, like I've been saying it for so long, this team needs a plan B, and it hasn't got a plan B because they are so what's the word? They're just so well. The way they're just so focused and drilled in playing one system or one way, which is narrow, and then having your fullbacks be your width and outlet. That it just makes you so predictable. It doesn't give you any X factors off the bench. Even it didn't give you any X factors off the bench. It doesn't give you any players that you really fear. Like I'm not being horrible at this team, but from Carranza, who do you who do you fear in this team? You can shut you can shut Gazdag down. There
Yeah.
are so many games where Gazdag doesn't. get involved. Or if you shut Gazdag down, you won't see him unless he scores a penalty. Uar is hit or miss. Again, I still do think. I think we did see during that first half the best Mikel Uar, like getting him playing on the last shoulder, playing him behind. Like no disrespect to Quinn Solomon, he's a child. Like Jack McGlynn's as good as he is on the ball, great midfielder. Again, he's another player where he can be stopped if players, if you play a compact line, he can play a great pass, but if you play a compact line, you can turn that down. You haven't got a player who, when he gets on the ball, you think, he's going to beat 3 or 4 players. Or if you have the unit pinned deep, you think, if he gets on the ball right now, we can be on the front foot. There is no one like that in this team. And that falls on the scouting department. And again, before we can moan about money, and yes, I'm not supporting the ownership here. I'm not saying that they're in the right. Again, money needs to be invested because clearly the MLS is going a completely different way to where it was 10 years ago. You need to start with the way that Miami are throwing money around, even clubs like Columbus Crew and stuff like that. Like, money's starting to be thrown around. But at the same time, other teams that, again, were so much worse than the Union 2 years ago, Cincinnati, who took the Union, one of the best guys behind the scenes of the Union, have managed to not only within 2.5 seasons, not only one, have managed to become a strong playoff team, but they've managed to become one of the leaders of the entire league and become a supporter shield contender through not spending a lot of money, losing their best player, and not heavily reinvesting that money. They managed to become that. So again, and if the manager isn't, keep repeating it, if the manager's not happy with the players that are being brought in, there needs to be an overall review from. This does fall on ownership because I need to call it out. There needs to be an overall review. There needs to be an overall, review of all the scouting of the team, what players are being brought in. Because again, if you have a hit rate of 3 out of 30 odd signings over the last 3 seasons, your scouting department's not working, your GM's not working. Clearly something isn't working. And again, clearly the general manager and the head coach aren't on the same page of all the players he's bringing in. 1, are for the second team. So again, all the signings this year aren't even for Jim Kern. And 2, and then 2 again, like the players that he does bring in, Jim doesn't like him, clearly doesn't rate. So 1, does Jim actually have a say in who gets brought in? And 2, do you spend all that money on when the money is actually spent? Again, when the money is actually spent, it's spent terribly. It's spent on players at this point now, we have to give the sample size of what we see from Ty Bariba over a year that it is a waste of money unless he comes good when Carranza goes. At this moment in time, he is a waste of money. Like, he can't even start for the team when Carranza isn't on the pitch. Or even we've had games this year where neither of them have been in the team, and Tyree Baribo hasn't even gotten close to start even getting a minute. There was, I think, what was the game earlier in the year where they had? I know Rafa Nalo was on the pitch and things like that, and I think it was Uar and Anderson or whatever, and I think Baribo got nowhere near close to coming on the pitch again. Like when the team does spend the money, it doesn't get spent well. I mean, they're spending $500,000 or 500,000 euros on players or from players, in Oluwathu, sorry, who is nowhere near close to getting the team again. So, your ownership, why would you trust your general manager, Ernst Tanner, to spend all that money when the money that has been spent is on players that can't even get near your team? At some point, there needs to be an overall review of the overall system, because clearly no one's happy. If you've got players openly calling out ownership, and you've got players openly calling people out within the club to start spending money, things aren't right. And at some point, everyone needs to have a sit down and come together and to actually sort things.
Absolutely. Now, listen, we didn't want to have too long of a show tonight, but Steve brings up a question that I want to mention for the next episode. He says, looking ahead at the schedule, where do you see the guys in standing wise entering League's Cup? I think it's a good question for the 3 of us to decide, figure out long term where we actually see this team projected. So, Steve, I'm gonna put a pin on that question for now, because I do want to discuss that at length, but we weren't going to have too long of a show tonight. Dave's out in England 5 hours ahead tired. I have things to do as well. But I like that as a kind of a segue because I think we're starting to get to a point where we have to start asking that question. What are the expectations for this club on June 16th? Because we knew what they were in February, but now expectations have changed entirely. But Dave, any last thought before we close out the show?
Uh, Again, it's quite a concerning time really for the team. I mean, only 4 points off the bottom of the Eastern Conference, which is, I mean, it shows how close the bottom half of the Eastern Conference is. But again, they're only 4 points off. They've been dragged into a. Do you know what I mean? I think looking at Steve's other comment quickly, I mean, what hurts most is the fact that the team's only 2 years removed from playing the finals. Now it's in rebuild mode. I mean, that's what happens when you don't reinvest. And there's a point, I think I said in the chat last night, I got to the point, I was like, look, there were so many players in this team where I'd look and go, just cash in on them now, and just get new blood in the team just to reinvest. Because things are so stale, it's so boring now. Again, certain players are great, they're fun to watch. But again, at some point, it's just so boring. It's the same thing every single week trotted out. Again, Kai produces some great stuff, but again, it's just the same nonsense every week. You just see him arguing with the referee, and again, after another corner that fails to beat the first man, or that set piece that doesn't produce anything, and then he's caught high up the pitch, the other fullbacks got a part of the pitch, or players aren't closing players down, the field just gets shredded. Martinez, at a certain point, I looked at it last night, so I don't really care how many of these players are here next season. If I was them, I'd blow it up and go again. And it's gotten to that point, you've lost your best player already. Blow it up and go again, completely see what Jim can do with a new set of players, with a new system plan. Whether Tanner's not going anywhere, but I mean, something needs to change. Or has to change the system, or complete change of the roster. I mean, again, that might be what's needed. As Steve said, you might need a complete rebuild from the team. Maybe it's just not the players have hit their ceiling for this team. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think it's just time. Everybody's getting frustrated with the same old stuff. So I think I'm going to agree with you there. I think it's time to rebuild. As much as we don't want to watch a team, sometimes you just have to do it. But this is across the pitch. We try to record at least once a week, every 10 days. It's been harder recently for all of us to do so. But as the season comes on and as Leagues Cup moves on, we'll try to get on recording more often. Until then, Dave GFC Miller on Twitter as well. Jose, who joins us more often than not, Jose R. Nunez 91 as well. Follow him for some great work, as well as, again, if you want to check out his Kai Wagner quote, please check out his social media there and everything else. But otherwise, the Union are not really fun to watch this year. That's all I'll say about that. But as always, go Union.